Welcome to our panel discussion, What Can I Do to Affect Change in My Community? I'm Joanna Lyon. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a graduate assistant in the Center for Public Impact at BGSU, and I'm also a PhD candidate in American Culture Studies. Paul Valdez is joining me today as a co-facilitator. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you to all of our panelists that are going to be joining us. As Joanna mentioned, my name is Paul Valdez. My preferred pronouns are he and him, and I'm the Associate Director in the Center for Public Impact. And we're excited to have this dialogue today to talk a little bit about what you can do to affect change in your community. First off, we had a few definitions that we wanted to share with you just to kind of set the context for our conversation. So first, as the Center for Public Impact, we work in the area of civic engagement and community engagement. And we thought it would be important to kind of put some definitions out there for you, just so we're on the same page about those. So this definition comes from Ehrlich from 2000. It set the basis for a lot of work within higher education around civic engagement. And so civic engagement is contributing and working to make a difference in the public or civic life of our communities and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and commitment to make that difference. It means promoting the quality of life in our communities and solving public problems through both political and non-political processes. Civic engagement is also undergirded by the constructs of collective action and social responsibility. We also thought it would be important to talk a little bit about democratic engagement, which this definition comes from the American Association of Colleges and Universities and NASPA. And the way that they frame it is that democratic engagement is an important component of civic engagement, and that it's the practice of engaged citizenship through democratic mechanisms and principles. So we live in a democratic society, and so those mechanisms and principles are specific to how we operate as a democracy. But politics is a process by which a group of people whose opinions or interests might be divergent, but we reach collective arguments that are generally regarded as binding on our groups and enforced as a common or public policy. So we thought that we wanted to kind of highlight those, but we wanted to make sure that you understand the distinction between democratic and civic engagement. So in the US, democratic engagement means engagement in a democracy or a democratic form of government. It is a central part of civic engagement, specifically relating to applying learned skills, knowledge, and commitments to contribute to public life through the democratic political process. And so Joanna's going to talk to us a little bit about the social change wheel and kind of how that gets put into operation.
So today's panel discussion will be framed by the social change wheel, which was created by Minnesota Campus Compact as a tool to explore different ways of being civically engaged in different activities that you can participate in to be civically engaged. It's important to highlight that anti-racism, equity, and co-creation are at the center of the wheel. And this is because anti-racism, equity, and co-creation are key components of a thriving democracy and what we're working towards when we engage in these activities. The shape of the wheel enables different forms of civic engagement to be rotated around the center so that they can work in collaboration and be coordinated to work towards these objectives. The inner ring consists of community and civic engagement activities that are commonly used on college and university campuses. And the outer activities are activities that could be held on a college campus, but also are engaged in more broadly within our community. Before we jump into the panel discussion, I'd like to do introductions for everyone to share your name, your pronouns, your title, and the organization or department that you're a part of.
Okay.
Brianne, would you like to start?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I am Brianne Hawkins. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a college student personnel program student at BGSU. I'm in my second year, and I'm a grad assistant in the Division of Diversity, Belonging, and Office of Title IX.
Hi everyone, my name is Carly Pritt. I use she, her, her pronouns, and I'm a part of the BGSU Votes team as a student leader. I'm also a senior here in my undergrad studying social studies education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deontay Shivers, BG grad, 2017 communication major. I'm the owner and founder of business Trigger Meals located in Ziggy's Bar, 300 East Wooster. Yeah, it's pretty much all I have right now.
I'm Jolie Sheffer. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a faculty member in English and American Culture Studies, and I'm the director of the Institute for the Study of Culture and Society, which is a kind of public humanities center here at Bowling Green State University. And relative to this conversation, I am also the current chair of the Perrysburg Coalition for Inclusion and Social Justice.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Toni Gordon. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am one of the assistant directors of diversity education and retention initiatives in the Office of Multicultural Affairs. And I do a lot of work in the community as it pertains to a lot of social justice, a lot of education surrounding diversity, etc. So it's good to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Will Daniels. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his. I am a PhD candidate in the American Cultural Studies Department here at BGSU.
Our panelists will share how they've been civically engaged through different methods included on the social change wheel. So our first question for all of you today is, what parts of the social change wheel do you have experience using to address racial justice, and what drew you to these activities? Anybody like to start the conversation?
I would be thrilled. So I think for me, the focus for me on this social justice wheel, particularly with the outer portion of the wheel, I think I find myself, if I am physically able, I do like to show and support through my demonstration. And by that, I mean, especially during the recent months, as it pertains to a lot of injustices. We've seen a lot of protests and a lot of demonstrations that way. However, being physically able, meaning I am part of the population that is immunocompromised, and so I don't always see myself being able to, but if I know that I am going to be in a safe space, then I will show my physical support. If not, there's another part of the wheel that says I'm monitoring my daily activities, and I'm very vocal on my own social media platforms. I speak about the issues, I raise awareness, I am engaging with other people's in my media platforms that way. If we go into the inner circle, I am an educator, and so parts of my daily activity is also engaging with my students and also with my fellow colleagues who are also wanting to learn more, but aren't sure where to gather their resources, aren't sure where to gather other knowledge bases, if you will. So I try my best to deliver readings, deliver articles, show videos, etc., because I want others to participate and engage in the dialogue and create change that way. So those are some of the things that a part of the wheel that I do and I try to be a part of. Other parts of the wheel, I do fundraising, I contribute my funding, I'm always giving if I can. Again, if I'm not physically able, I'm going to support. I support Black-owned businesses, right? Like, so I support other businesses that aren't gaining a lot of money, especially in these times. And so I do my best to contribute to their businesses and stuff, things like that. And so what drew me to these is that I'm always looking for who's not able and who's not at the table or who can't do it themselves. And so what can I do to help? What can I do to help others engage, help others feel like they could be a part of a movement or understand a movement, because I don't want to be a movement on my own. So I do those things so that I'm helping others be a part of that with me.
Thanks, Tony. I could go give my response next, I guess. Well, from the wheel, some things that I try to do, or at least will, aspire to do, is sorry, I'm just looking at it. The social responsible and daily behavior aspect. And to me, that may just look like watching my actions and correcting myself in that moment or right after a moment occurred where I may have like said something wrong or did something wrong or noticed where I could do something better. And even like trying to practice calling out others when I see like where I can and where I can help assist with that. And then also, I kind of feel like I'm trying to practice more deliberative and reflective dialogue. And so that's why I mentioned earlier that, I'm helping with the social justice retreat for my program, because I do want to be able to provide those spaces for folks to talk about different topics and, give that platform for them. And I really think that's my interest, just because I feel like maybe I'm kind of like soft-spoken, or there's been times where I haven't been able to, I didn't know how to advocate for myself, or, I'm still trying to learn how to speak up and feel comfortable speaking about certain things. So as I'm trying to learn how to do that for myself, I'm also trying to help do that for others. So, they won't have to, go through that or make a realization as late as I did.
I can go next. So I think, one of the things that's really interesting to me, both in the change wheel and also hearing what Tony and Brianna have said, is that, we often enter into these things from a particular position, right? Either because of a job or a role we have, or because of personal, right? But I think what each of us is experiencing is the way that you enter at one point, but it translates into many points on the wheel. I assume I am not alone, that I highlighted many different parts on this wheel that I see myself engaging in, and in different parts of my life. Some of these to me seem about personal behaviors and kind of things that I do one-on-one, right? And then others feel more institutional, like in my role as director of ICS. In that role, the idea of like socially responsible daily behaviors means, how do I make sure the communications we send out are accessible to the visually impaired? How do we make sure our processes include transcription services and other things, so that that's not about an individual me with someone else, but it is about thinking about how in my role, how do we make those things a daily part of what we do? How do we think about equity and bake it in to our processes? But then I also think that, part of this is about, formal and informal roles, the visible and the behind the scenes stuff that you're doing, right? Some things others will never know about, but you are helping to kind of shift a culture. And I think a lot of us are really thinking in different ways about, how do you scale up? How do you take what you are doing in those individual or in that particular role, and how do you level that up, right? How do you make that not just in your role, but the whole division? How do you make that a whole community? How do you do those things? And so for me, I am just seeing a lot of things cutting across, because there are distinct activities I'm doing as a professor, in the way I teach and kind of the ethics and the daily interactions of that. There is my kind of administrative role. There's also that, like, as a private citizen, right? I am chair of this social justice organization in my community that is not directly related to my roles on campus, but it's clearly informed by them, right? The things I'm learning in one place, I am trying to take into those other spaces. So for me, it's hard for me to say kind of what drew me, because I've come in at different points and then I've tried to sew these all together, weave them together so that the whole fabric, personal and professional life, I am trying to live a life that is devoted to justice and equity.
I can go ahead. Kind of a difficult one to follow up, but anyway. So first of all, I recognize voting in formal political activities, being a part of BGSU votes. We're out there every day on campus registering students as they come by, making sure everyone we see is informed on how you can vote, the different ways to vote, the different ways to get engaged, civically, democratically, like the distinction we mentioned before. And that's really a rewarding thing to do. And also personally, with voting and civic engagement, it's recognizing, looking at the candidates locally, statewide, and obviously presidential. What do they mention about racial justice? Do they mention it at all? And what's their plan to address it if they are elected in? And then more on the side, as a future social studies teacher in my cohort, we're all going into our professional year of student teaching and everything. And I've appreciated, a lot of my professors have made it a point to bring this up, just racial justice in the classroom first, starting off in the school year. And as social studies teachers, that's a major thing to talk about. So a lot of that has been, I saw, deliberate and reflective dialogue. So we've been discussing things like, it's not really a secret that the Ohio social studies standards and the content and the textbooks that we go through aren't inclusive of all, marginalized groups' actual history and the true history of America. And so a lot of our conversation is, how do we navigate that while also participating in following these standards? And how do we bring up things when we're not necessarily required to, but it is the history of America and the world, and which just it's not as accurate. So hopefully in the following years, when they're reviewed, in 2 years, actually, we looked it up, we'll make some changes there. And that's also talking about, as a cohort, there's, out of 35 of us going to professional year in social studies education specifically, there's one person who identifies as a person of color. And that's talking about, well, how did we get here? Why, as the College of Education in general, why do we lack in diversity so much? And so just having those honest conversations, just, I think, bringing it down to wherever you can affect your personal community and what you do every day is very important as well.
Okay, I'll join. Again, my name is Deontay. Looking at the wheel, the thing that really drew me with being a business owner and everything, which I think the thing that really stand out to me the most is the fundraising, giving, and philanthropy part. Excuse me. I just think that's really important in the community. I've always wanted to be, I've always wanted to be the change that I always, wanted to see in the world. And with being a minority in the community, and having the business that I have, I just felt that it was best to kind of use the platform that I've built over the years, and just really put it out there, and just really, like I said, just be the change that I wanted to see in the world. Use the business that I was blessed with to be able to bless others. I think that's really huge. Another thing was the protests and demonstrations. I feel, especially us Black men, we don't really have the opportunity to really have our voice heard a lot. And with having the platform that I have, I feel just organizing, different events like that will really give us a chance to be heard. And yeah, that's pretty much what I have right now. Thank you.
I guess I'll go next. So for me, I became an activist when I was getting my MA in literature at Eastern Michigan University. So that's in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And for us, we were an education justice group. And so we kind of had three different kind of different campaigns that we started. And most of it, we were folks who were reading a lot about activism, either through in the classroom or either for fun. So there were lots of political science students. I was a literature student who was learning about kind of post-colonial literature, and I wanted to, learn and make a difference. And so our first campaign, it was helping out the lecturers who were trying to unionize on our campus, and we learned about like the really kind of poor teaching conditions, and we wanted to support as students. And so that was our first big campaign. And our second campaign was Anti-Sweatshop Campaign. And we were trying to make sure that anything that was made that was made for the school, so if it had our school logo, that it was made in kind of fair working conditions, and those workers were also compensated. And so we were part of this group called United Students Against Sweatshops, and we were doing kind of an international kind of solidarity campaign. Workers who are already trying to unionize in their own home country, and how can we leverage our privilege as students as a way to make sure these workers are being able to, get paid what they're worth. And then our third shift for the campaign was the EAA. It's the Education Achievement Authority. This was a kind of a big privatization of the Detroit public schools. And this happened after we had an emergency manager. So this is all post-bankruptcy in Detroit. So lots of austerity measures that tried to kind of take public support away from public education. And so we said, as Eastern, we were the connector. So Eastern had the charter for these different EAA charter schools. So these were like for-profit schools that were taking away money from public schools. And so we led protests and demonstrations to say, like, this is really unfair. We also did kind of community organizing. So we were kind of both on campus and off campus. So we talked with like the Latino Student Association, the Muslim Student Association. There are several different associations that we all talked with, and we said, like, this all impacts us as Eastern students, and we're all different, racial or ethnic or gender minorities. And so we all wanted to help out in different ways because it affected us as a community of students. But then we also connected with teachers who were working in Detroit public schools. My dad, he taught for 30 years in Detroit public schools, and he was kind of forced into retirement because of this mass privatization. And so we were kind of working with different parents and teachers who were also affected by this privatization of these public schools. And then we just did a lot of advocacy and raising awareness. And so we were, flyering on campus. We would also go off campus, just to kind of raise awareness. And I think that getting the word out there that like what was going on was not okay and was really affecting, mostly African-American students in Detroit. And so like the level of education was much lower than it was in the public schools. And so we tried to raise community awareness. And then kind of looking at like the inner wheel, it was about building community building and partnership. And so I think that for me, through coalitions of like finding out like this is really an injustice, and that's how we kind of make things better, is like when we work together towards like a common tool. And it might not reflect personally for everyone, but I think that if someone feels moved by something to change, you can kind of focus one thing at a time and kind of go kind of from campaign to campaign. And what drew me into it was there's a documentary, and Charles Kernigan, who was an anti-sweatshop activist, he came to our school, and I was never involved in activism. I was really too nervous and too shy to ever get involved. And students were saying, well, how do we fight anti-sweatshop stuff? What kind of brands do we wear? And he said, you can't buy your way out of a crisis. You have to organize. And I said, oh, what does organizing mean? And he said, this is like working together with, 3 to 5 of your friends and pick something that you want to do and launch a campaign. So that's what we did. Thank you.
If you could also expand on perhaps additional ways that you would like to engage again across different activities, or ways in which you could collaborate with other people or other organizations to build upon the work that you addressed, to again touch on more of the areas of the wheel.
I would say that, kind of building on what I said before, I think thinking about how wherever you come in, whatever your first step is, once you do that and sort of figure out your message and your audience, figuring out how to extend that, right? And sometimes that's through breadth. So it's through coalitions, it's through, if you're a campus organization, reaching out to community organizations, right? Or finding others that have aligned interests. So if you're interested in racial justice, talking to the immigration rights community in your neighborhood, right? So part of it is sort of moving outward. But it's also about, I think, really thinking about those different strategies, because you want to hit different audiences. And so social media will hit different people than flyering might, right, in a downtown business area, or than kind of personal appeals through email, right? Each of these is going to have create sort of different opportunities and help you reach different audiences. And so I think thinking about all of these things can be connected, and to figure out more than one strategy, more than one means of getting your message out. And I think that's one of the things the wheel kind of visualizes, that there's more, that you can go further by trying some different strategies, linking up with different organizations. That doesn't mean you have to become an expert in all these things, but you need to partner, truly collaboratively partner with others who can help you expand and amplify your message.
Yeah, to cap on that really quickly, and Joey said it perfectly, right? Like extending your circle, extending your experiences. I mentioned that if I'm able, right, I will go to a protest. But if I'm not, I use my platform on my social media. I'm comfortable with that, but I have to be willing to be uncomfortable also, and delving into spaces that I wouldn't normally delve into, going to different meetings that I wouldn't normally go to. By the way, I'm not shy, so I would normally go to a town hall in my area. And Jolie, I'm in Perrysburg, so I would love to come and go to those spaces, right? Like, so networking, finding who's where, right? Like that's really important in the around the wheel approach to that is, right, like finding demonstrations or finding spaces that you're not normally in the wheel. I'm normally in other parts of the wheel, so now I need to go into other spaces that I'm not, and I need to be okay with that. So I'm no longer a fly on the wall. I'm no longer trying to be outward and saying that's what they do on the inside. I need to be a part of the inside. So extending your circle just a little bit to say, I can do this. And I mean that, and I mean to do this, and I want to put my one foot in front of the other to make those actionable steps. So I think that that's a great way. And Jolie said it perfectly. You have to be willing to go in spaces where you don't normally go. You have to be willing to say and be in the spaces that you don't normally be in. So yeah.
Going off of both points made, I think this like around the wheel approach is very, it can be incorporated. For examples Tony gave us, if she can't be somewhere physically, she will, use her platform to, still be present. Or if we're just looking at like current times right now, the around the wheel approach, I feel like it really addresses something that was mentioned in the resources that you all sent to for this. And flexibility is imperative. We're seeing the, the current state, with COVID, it has switched how we do things and how we engage and how we protest and how we advocate. So with having this around the wheel approach, we're able to go through and pick and select and see like, oh, I used to do this, but let me see where I could kind of navigate towards, and maybe if that will fit with me and fit with how I have to adapt. So for me, that's how I will mostly incorporate it. Like I mentioned earlier, most of the social change involvement that I'm in is within my role, within my, in my office. So kind of thinking like, well, how we used to, do in-person events and have key speakers come and, to gain the interest of students. So that's not going to happen anymore. So how are we going to do these things? Or we're having I had these things planned that what I was going to promote on our social media and programming, but we're having instances on campus where, that kind of shifts like the needs of like what people want and what they want to see. So now I have to figure out how. I don't really want to plan a protest because that's in person, but I still want to be able to make sure that, students' voices are heard to react to a certain, situation, whatever the case may be. So now, what am I supposed to do? So maybe, this around the wheel approach can really help with like instances like that.
Yeah, I really like the idea of like using it as a kind of a path or personal growth. It's just like, well, I, feel strong in this area and this like, but where can I improve? Where am I lacking? And it, kind of helps you move toward like, this is just a lifestyle, and seeing where constantly like you can improve in your community and then in your personal bubble. And yeah.
I think for us as a student group, I think that we really didn't engage that much in kind of voting in formal political activities. And I think that we thought we were too cool for like electoral politics. And I think that I'm really excited to see lots of like Gen Z kind of making that connection between like on the ground activism and electoral politics and registering for folks to vote and like really being engaged. Because I think that my kind of generation was really kind of like jaded about politics. And so I'm like really excited to see folks getting involved and to really kind of pushing connections, which, someone would, want to support a candidate, but not wanting to go to like a rally that seems too like, in your face. And so there's different ways for students to engage in different ways.
Do you have additional recommendations for viewers for how to become civically engaged, whether they're students, staff, faculty members, local community members, steps that they can take to dive in deeper to some of these activities?
My number one recommendation, PG votes, get involved in local politics. There's a lot of people like, the hype is obviously around like the bigger elections we have, like the presidential, Senate and everything. But really like the most effective change in your community you can do is to be involved in those city forums or town forums and everything. And the past couple of years, I've been going to the ones here in Bowling Green, and it's an interesting crowd. I'm probably the only one there, like under 40, but I think it's a very, it's an awesome place to get engaged and see like, well, where is my community lacking, or what are they doing well? And we have a really cool opportunity here in Bowling Green where there's a tipping point kind of coming here in this election. Like, so being involved in this as students, as, people involved in academia in general, just to see where we can improve. And yeah, so local politics, number one.
I think for me, it's probably kind of cheesy, but a recommendation or advice is just choose something that's authentic to you. So like, if you decide that you do want to become more civically engaged, really take the time to sit back and, understand why and what it is that you want to be, become involved in. Because, I feel like I've experienced that, like, I've tried to do certain things, but I see like it didn't really have a successful outcome, or, I didn't feel really satisfied with it. And that was just because I was trying to like navigate and learn like what worked best for me. Like, probably going out in the front lines may not be my gist, but more so doing like more behind the scenes work and one-on-one work with folks, but that still makes an impact on, creating social change. So just really finding what works for you and the purpose, and being authentic while you're doing it.
Usually what I tell students or in the room in which I'm doing some type of education, I say, what can take you that next degree higher? Like, how can you get that 1 degree hotter? We all know the difference between 69 degrees and 70 degrees outside. It feels vastly different. I don't know why. But in your sphere, what can you do to take you that 1 degree hotter, or maybe that next level? So if you're speaking in a circle of friends here, how can you extend that just a bit further, right? Jolie talked about the breadth in which you get involved. So maybe it is going from maybe being involved on the local level to now extending that just a little bit to research what's happening on the other side of the local level. So we're in BG, but I'm not from BG. Maybe I'm from Cincy. Go research what's happening in Cincy. If that's concerning to you, you need to then start to research what's happening in your own backyard. You may attend BG and it impacts you at BG, but then you're worried about home. 1 degree hotter, where I'm asking you to now start to be a little more involved, getting off your couch just a little bit more, opening a book, researching, and growing yourself just a little bit more to make you that much more knowledgeable. And I was, I remember back in the day when I heard that 1 degree hotter, 1 degree makes a difference between simmering and boiling. So making yourself that much more involved, even that, just that little tipping point can involve you that much more in engaging in other topics and other opportunities.
I think my recommendation is, that it only takes one person to make a difference, and to, what's your kind of sphere of influence, they call it. So like that, your friends, your family, how can you influence others and kind of, get to have fun doing something. I would also encourage folks to, that like change takes a really long time. And so there's sometimes like little victories that happen recent, but then it's like, you're really in it it's really a marathon, not a sprint. So that's like a reminder too, to like cherish those small wins, but to like know that you're going to be in for the long while.
I want to just sort of underscore everything everyone has said. I agree with all of it. And the other piece that I would add is that, wherever you are situated, you have certain kinds of authority, right? With your peers. If you're, if you're a student, you have authority with your peers, right? If you are in a particular job position, you may have a different kind of authority, right? And to really use that and to lean into that, because I think oftentimes we actually don't realize the power we have, right? The ability to communicate with others. When we are passionate and informed about an issue, whether it's using social media, whether it's organizing something, whether you're a teacher and it's how you operate in the classroom, in each of those spheres, you have a lot of power if you actually recognize it as power and, like I said, are informed and passionate. You really can do a lot. And I think speaking as a white person who is older than the rest of you, right? I am further into middle age than I'd like to admit. And so I find myself kind of in a different stage in my career, right? And it's never too late. And some of the activities I'm involved in, I have a long history of. Others, it's the events of the last few years that really kind of pushed me to really access the power and authority that I had, that sort of I hadn't quite realized how much I had, and to just commit to using my voice as much as possible. And the other piece I would add to that, and this is something that our former colleague, some of you may know, who has gone to another institution now, but Christina Lunsford, she said something to me that has always stuck with me, that she said, you have to invite other people into rooms that you're in. And so now, because I am a middle-aged woman in a somewhat, I've been at this institution for 14 years. I know people, I know the institution. I have access in ways that, 15 years ago, I couldn't have had. I try and remember that every time. And who needs to be in this room that isn't here? And whatever other rooms I get invited into, how can I make sure that voices who aren't being heard come with me? Right? That I open that door a little wider, that I specifically use some of my authority to make space for others that the institution, right, hasn't prioritized. And I think that that's just really important for me, recognizing that I can do things even when I feel very powerless about many things in this world, thinking like, no, in this sphere of influence, I can do certain things, right? That is an antidote to despair. It's an antidote to cynicism, right? It's an antidote to feeling helpless. And so I would just, that would be my message to everyone, is like, focus your energies in a direction, access your own authority and power and connections, and make space, make room for others to come into those spaces and transform them even further.
Can I add? Can I share really quickly? Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Joanna. I wanted to add to Jolie's point and also to Will's point about how change can be hard and it's daunting, and cynicism comes into play. Like, this is never going to be this, or I feel this way, so I'm never going to get involved. I think it really helps when you start to look at the resources and people who have been in the work for a long time and still find joy, right? Like, people who do this and are happy as all get out, who love what they do, who love going to protests and love organizing, and they've made a career out of this. And so if you're looking at what it is happening now and how tired you are, especially in the last several months, people are like tired because of COVID, but then on top of that, they're tired because of racial injustices that they're seeing. And then they're just like, I'm done with it. I don't want to open my social media anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Many of us have made careers out of this, and therefore we enjoy it. We love impacting people. We love engaging with other people. We love to go and vote. Thank you, BG Vote. Like, we love to be a part of it because that, yeah, that's right, Carly. We love to be a part of what is happening, not just civically, but also democratically. And so we want to be a part of the change. And I think we need to flip it on its head to find where we are seeing our impact and where we're putting our efforts, but also where we're finding that our energy is coming back to us, bringing us joy, bringing us some type of, I don't want to say satisfaction. Yes, change can be long-winded and it can be hard and arduous, but it can also be satisfying to see what is happening with your words. Somebody who says, I get it. I would love to come to a meeting with you, and you're like, yes. Or you're at the BG Vote station and you got one person to register. You're like, yes, I got it. I did it. I'm doing it. You are doing it. And I think that's where we need to find removing the parts of cynicism and matching that with some satisfaction or some, I don't want to say satisfaction in the sense that it's instant, but it's also rewarding to know that you're doing something that's making a huge impact on someone else's life.
Thank you for that, and for all of your experiences and your ideas and recommendations. Do you have any other comments you'd like to add or questions you'd like to pose to the group?
I would just add one small thing. Kind of what Tony said really made me think of this when she was talking about the rewards and satisfactions of getting involved. And I think what each of us in our own spheres is talking about, whether it's Carly through BGSU Votes, Will with the kind of organizing he was doing at Eastern, Brianne and her role on campus, right? Part of this is doing this work connects you to your community. And in a way, I mean, like, I have lived in Perrysburg for 8 out of the last 14 years. And yet, until I was involved with the coalition, I really didn't know my neighbors, right? I didn't actually I wouldn't go to like a downtown event, I mean, pre-pandemic, and realize, oh, that's the mayor and she works at Able, and like, oh, and that's Natalie at the library. Like, I didn't know all these people who were doing all these interesting things. And getting involved in this way, it is also deeply selfish. Like, I love it. I love my community more. I know what's happening. I feel tapped into the pulse in a way that I didn't before. And so it really does give back to you in all sorts of ways. And I think that, you know, you're absolutely right, Tanya. We don't talk about that piece enough, right? We talk about the work, but there's also the joy, and there's plenty of it to go around.
I guess in terms of like questions to the group, just since we're talking about like civic engagement, democratic engagement, I just wanted to ask if there's anything that we at BGSU Votes can do that you guys all see to address racial justice and also be more inclusive, and just as we go around educating people on civic matters and how to vote and everything.
Here's one thing I love about your organization. It's apolitical, right? Like, it's just a voting platform, right? And I think that needs to be said more, right? Like, I think that needs to be said more, because I think when people think of voting and they think of BG Votes, that they're probably looking for people to vote for a certain party, right? Like, so I think being in spaces where people aren't familiar, going to the meetings where people are gathering now virtually in mass spaces, right? So I'm one of the advisors for BSU. Would love to see BG Votes come to a meeting and just speak on political platforms in general, right? Like, in general, this is what we do. And I think that would help debunk the myth of BG Votes is out to get you to vote for a certain person, a certain party, a certain thing. And I, again, love the organization. I know about it. Back in my day, when I was in undergrad, I actually was a part of, I know, right? I'm so old. I was a part of a type of platform just like that. It was just a platform to get you out there and to get involved at the grassroots level, like at the lowest level. At least go and find out what's happening with your backyard. You're voting for judges. You're voting for policies. You're not voting just for a senator or a president. You're doing things in your community who needs you. And so I think that would be an area that I could see you like extending your hand into other, hey, can we just talk about voting, right? Like, can we just come to your organization and talk about voting? Sure. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we would love to have you, right? I think that's one thing.
I just want to kind of emphasize what Tony said. So she mainly like addressed like, oh, you know, your org is just, you know, sending the message like voting. And she mentioned like maybe, you know, she's an advisor at BSU and, you know, coming up with the idea you could present at BSU, but making sure like to relate to like your question, making sure BGSU Votes is trying to like reach out to those orgs that are like targeted towards you know, more minoritized groups, or just groups that this matter, like racial injustice or getting racial justice, you know, matter to, just because there's a minoritized groups specifically, like there's a stigma like in certain communities like, oh, vote is not important, my you know, my voice doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what I do. So like you all are going in there and kind of debunking those myths, and you know, even going to orgs, you know, that may not be connected to minoritized populations, but, you know, still kind of spreading the word and the importance of that. Just like making sure you're going with a message that the population can relate to.
Yeah, I really agree with that too. I think that it's also about kind of framing about, you know, like voting is like a you know, racial justice issue. And I know the BGSU Votes does different, you know, talks with different classes. And I think it's, you know, like you can talk about the history of voter suppression for racial minorities in the country and like happening in the past and in the present. So just kind of really bring like the historical and present context of why voting is a matter of racial justice.
Well, thank you all for your suggestions and everything.
I think one thing that your comments have all kind of made me realize a little bit more about working with the social change wheel, right? Like the various different methods, is that it takes resilience as well to like if you participate in one of those activities or one of those strategies, then maybe it doesn't look exactly how you thought it looked, right? You might see something on the news or you might see something elsewhere. And so you're thinking it might be one thing and it turns out to be something completely different. And so maybe that doesn't fit for you for the first time you do it, but not every protest or demonstration looks exactly the same, right? Or not every community organizing activity or event looks exactly the same. So you have to try it multiple times before you realize like where you might fit best within those different strategies. So that's something that just kind of came up in my mind as you all were speaking.
And to add to that, Paul, like, I think we need to think differently about what success means, right? Is success 5,000 people? Maybe, but maybe it's 50 people, or maybe it's 5, but those 5 people get really energized and go out and one of them decides to run for school board, right? Because they're dissatisfied with how things are being done. And then that can be a huge change, right? Or if it is just kind of your relationship to the community you're a part of and feeling like you need to understand what's happening and be involved in that. Like, so I think thinking differently about success. I think too often, at least I fall victim to this, right? Of like thinking success means us hitting a certain number or a room feeling filled or, or something. And success can mean a lot of different things. And part of this is resilience and stamina. You need to build up some stamina for this so that you can be in it for the long haul. And that doesn't mean you keep doing the same thing in the same way, but that there's always going to be a next step you could take with this, with whatever work you're doing, and to kind of build up that strength to take it to the next level, to get things 1 degree hotter, right? As Tony said, which I really love.
We used to have a saying back at my other institutions that I've worked. I used to do residential life work and talking about programming, right? Like it used to be that we were looking at success in terms of numbers, but when you reframe it to the learning outcome, did all of those people hit your learning outcomes? If not, then you didn't do the job. Like you got all these bodies, but you didn't do anything. So like Jolie said, flipping it to say, okay, if 5 people showed up, great, because they did they meet the learning outcomes? Did they hit what you wanted them to get? And then they were actually in action doing those things. Did you get someone to vote? If the learning outcome is I will get several of these people to understand what voting does and where it impacts, and they then went to vote and told their friends, who then told their friends, who then told their friends, and everybody is synced up to understand voting isn't just the presidential election, it is impacting where I live today in these different areas. And it's about voter suppression, it's about what gerrymandering does, it's about what, all of the things that I did not understand, now I do understand. If they hit my learning outcome, then I am golden. If they are understanding what I'm trying to do, then I'm great at it. And that's what brings me joy, right? Like that's where the joy hits, right? I'm gonna say one last thing. I know, right? Like, she don't stop talking. Uh, my final thing, and I think Joanna, you can take this, you can take it back after I'm done if no one else has anything to add. But it is so empowering to be on this panel, to hear from others, right? Like I don't mind getting into this space because I love to hear what other people have to say. And I myself have learned from all of the people who are here today. I now know where I can go. I've made a connection with Jolie. I've made a connection with Carly. I already know Will and Breon. And so it's great for me to be here in this space to just know where I can take that circle or that sphere and move it elsewhere. How else can I be impactful in my work? Where else can I go? I live in Perrysburg. I now know Jolie is a part of the Perrysburg Coalition. And now I get to do other things. And so this is very important. And I thank you all for putting this on today. And inviting us to be a part of this conversation, but allowing me to also learn from others in this space. So thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining us and again, sharing your ideas and experiences, and glad you could all come together and meet each other. And we hope that viewers also will look around them within their community on campus and in their home communities and connect with other people and consider different ways that they can also engage in the wheel and try some new activities and develop partnerships as well.
And can I just say, Joanna and Paul, that like, if folks don't know, the Center for Public Impact is a fabulous place to start. If you want to get involved, but you're not exactly sure where best to put your energies or what community organizations are out there that have programs that might interest you, that can be your first step. Your first step could be calling the Center for Public Impact, sending them an email, because they are so connected throughout Wood and Lucas County and well beyond that. So they've got literally hundreds of community organizations that they're partnering with every semester. So you guys are a wonderful resource, and I want more people to know what great work you're doing.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. Find our website, it's BGSU Center for Public Impact. There are newsletters you can sign up for, both for students and staff and faculty, that highlight opportunities that you can get engaged in. If you have a specific interest, we're happy to meet with you or exchange emails with you and help you find an organization that aligns with your interests. So please do reach out to us. Paul, would you like to add anything?
No, I appreciate everyone's comments and sharing your experiences today. And thank you, Joanna, for getting this panel together and doing all the heavy lifting of the organization of this event. So it's nice to be able to have dialogue with colleagues and students across campus, and just learned a lot from each of you today, and hopefully other folks that view this will also have that same impression.